It happened a long time ago, back when the world still felt small and safe, when nights stretched endlessly and every sound in the dark seemed to carry meaning. He was 7, maybe 8, small for his age, quiet, with the kind of imagination teachers called bright and parents called restless. He shared a room with his older brother, John. 2 narrow bunk beds pressed against the far wall, the top bunk creaking whenever one of them turned over. That night began like any other. Dinner had been noisy, the kind of ordinary noise that feels like comfort. Dishes clinking, forks scraping plates, the TV humming faintly in the front room. His mother was laughing at something on the screen, his father's deep voice rumbling beneath it, and the smell of soap and detergent still lingered from the evening cleanup. By 8:30 he was sent to bed. His brother was still allowed to stay up. The boy didn't complain, he was used to it. He brushed his teeth, dragged his small feet down the long hallway, and pushed open the door to their room at the very back of the house. The air changed there, it always did. The warmth from the rest of the house never quite reached it. The room held its own temperature, cool, faintly metallic, with the dry scent of laundry detergent and the old varnish of the wooden floorboards. He climbed into the lower bunk, tucked his blanket tight, and switched on the little clip light above his head. A warm yellow glow bloomed across his open schoolbook, while the rest of the room faded into quiet shadows. From the living room came the faint laughter of the sitcom his parents were watching. Muffled voices, safe sounds. He turned a page, tracing the words with his finger, his small mind drifting. That was when he heard it, a sound so faint it could have been nothing at all. Scratch. A soft, dry sound, like the tip of a nail catching wood. He froze, waited. The noise didn't come again. Probably the house settling, he told himself. Maybe the wind. But there was no wind. He lowered his eyes to the page again. Then, scratch. This time longer, slower. It came from the direction of the door. He turned toward it, every muscle still. The reading light left a soft reflection on the silver doorknob, but the rest of the door was swallowed in darkness. "John?" he whispered. His voice came out small, careful. No answer. The sound stopped. The ceiling fan above him hummed unevenly, its slow wobble making faint clicking noises. The house was otherwise still. He let a few seconds pass, then turned another page. Scratch. This one is deeper. The sound of something deliberate, dragging slowly from top to bottom. His throat went dry. "Dad?" he tried. "Mom?" No response. The scratching continued, steady now. 3 seconds, pause, 3 seconds, pause. Like something counting time in the dark. He pulled the blanket up to his chest, his eyes locked on the faint reflection of the doorknob. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might be loud enough for whoever, or whatever, was outside to hear. Then it changed. When he whispered, "Who's there?" Barely audible, the scratching stopped. Silence flooded the room. Then it started again, harder, faster. The sound grew rougher, furious, clawing rather than scraping, wood splintering beneath nails. The door shuddered in its frame. He opened his mouth to scream, but the air caught in his throat. All he could do was stare. The doorknob trembled once, then turned. Slowly, carefully. The latch clicked. He bolted sideways, diving beneath the blanket. His small hands clutched the fabric so tight his knuckles hurt. The light still glowed faintly through the material, a weak yellow pulse against his breath. Everything went quiet again, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. Then the creak of the door. It opened with a long, low groan. He could hear it move inch by inch, the hinges grinding. The air in the room shifted, cold air brushing his face, carrying the faint scent of dust and old varnish. Something stepped inside. He didn't see it. He didn't dare look. He heard only the soft pressure of carpet beneath his weight. One step, then another, and then silence. He thought for a moment that maybe he had imagined it. Maybe fear had built itself into something else. He let his breath out slowly. That was when he felt it. A soft tug at the blanket near his feet, just a little at first, then harder. The covers lifted an inch, 2 inches, and he felt cold air brush against his ankles. Something touched him. Not a hard grip, just a faint, curious drag of fingers, or nails, against the top of his foot. He screamed. The sound tore out of him, raw and terrified. He heard hurried footsteps in the hallway, the pounding rhythm of his father's heavy steps, his mother's voice calling his name. The door burst open, flooding the room with light. He saw his parents' faces first, confused, frightened, blinking against the brightness. His brother stood behind them, wide-eyed, still in his pajamas. "What happened?" his father demanded. He couldn't speak. He pointed toward the door, toward where it had been. They searched, checked under the bed, the closet, the window. Everything was normal. The air was still, and the house silent except for his own trembling breaths. His father ran a hand down the front of the door. Smooth, clean, not a mark anywhere. Bad dream, his father said softly. You were asleep, that's all. I wasn't, he whispered. I saw it. The handle moved. His father's eyes softened with disbelief. His mother smoothed the blanket, kissed his forehead, and told him to go back to sleep. But when the lights went out again, he couldn't close his eyes. Every shadow felt heavier than before. He could still feel that faint, cold pressure against his foot. That night marked the beginning of something. He slept in his parents' room for a week after that. They teased him gently, said he was growing out of the fear stage. But he knew what he'd heard. He knew what he'd felt. And though life went on, school, friends, cartoons, the memory stayed. Not sharp, not fresh, but buried, like something waiting beneath the surface. Years passed. The family stayed in the same house, though the boy grew older, taller, quieter. The bunk beds were replaced with 2 separate frames, the reading light gone. One summer, his father decided to repaint the hallway. The door to the boy's room came off its hinges, propped against the wall. As his father sanded and wiped the wood, he frowned. Hey, he called out. The boy came closer. The back of the door, the side that faced the hallway, had marks. Faint, uneven scratches running from the top panel down to the level of the knob. Not deep enough to gouge the wood, but visible, overlapping lines that caught the light. His father chuckled, brushing his thumb over them. Must have been here for years. But the boy knew they hadn't. He could see the exact pattern, the exact height where the dragging had stopped. The same as that night. He didn't say a word. Time dulled it, the way time dulls everything. He moved out and built a new life. But sometimes late at night, he'd hear something in the quiet of his own home. A creak, a tap, and feel that same low pulse of dread rise inside him. He learned to laugh it off, to tell himself it was just the house breathing. Until one winter evening years later, when he returned home for a visit. The house was different. Brighter, newer, with freshly painted walls. His old room had been converted into a guest room, now featuring pale blue curtains and a soft rug. But the air was still the same. Cool, with a hint of dryness and a faint scent of old wood beneath the fresh paint. They sat together after dinner, the 4 of them. His mother was cheerful as ever. His father was quiet but content. His brother, now grown, is sitting across the table with a beer. At one point his mother laughed. Do you remember, she said, how you used to think someone was scratching at your door? You scared yourself so badly you wouldn't sleep alone for a week. He smiled. Yeah, he said softly. I remember. His brother looked up. Wait, you mean that night? He nodded, expecting a smirk, but his brother didn't laugh. His expression shifted, uneasy. That's weird, his brother murmured, because I heard it too. The table went quiet. What do you mean? Their father asked, half smiling, unsure if it was a joke. The night after, his brother said, you were sleeping with Mom and Dad. I was in our room alone. I heard the same thing, the scratching, but it came from inside this time. The boy, now a man, felt something cold press against his chest. His brother went on. It started light, then louder. And I thought it was you, but then I remembered you weren't there. I didn't move. I just listened. I swear it was right by my bed. Their mother laughed nervously, brushing it off, but neither of them joined her. The conversation shifted after that to safer things. Old stories, family updates, but the silence between the brothers lingered, heavy and unspoken. Later that night, long after everyone had gone to bed, he found himself walking the familiar hallway. It was late. The house was dark except for the weak orange glow of a lamp near the living room. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet the same way they used to. He stopped outside his old room. The door had been replaced, newer, smoother, freshly painted white. But the knob was the same old silver one, a little loose, faintly rattling when touched. He turned it slowly. The door opened with a quiet sigh. The room was empty, except for a neatly made guest bed. The curtains swayed slightly in a draft from the vent. He stood there for a long time, breathing in the stillness. The air carried the faint smell of paint and something else underneath. Wood, dust, maybe even a trace of the old varnish. He stepped inside, the carpet soft beneath his feet, and for a moment he was 7 again. The yellow light above the bunk, the soft hum of the ceiling fan, the sound scratch. He froze. It came from behind him, from the door frame. Slow, careful, almost gentle. He turned his head slightly, listening. Scratch, long drawn out, the same sound, the same rhythm, the same patience. His heart pounded once, twice, then steadied. He didn't move, didn't breathe. The sound stopped. The quiet afterward was immense. He stood in it, eyes open, waiting. Then for the first time he smiled. It wasn't the smile of someone who'd gone mad. It was the calm, weary smile of someone who had spent a lifetime waiting for a sound that finally came back. He took a slow breath and whispered almost kindly, "We got it." Then he stepped out, closing the door softly behind him. The next morning, the family found him sitting at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, looking out the window at the quiet street. He looked peaceful, rested. No one mentioned the night before. But when his father passed the hallway on his way to the garage, something caught his eye. A faint series of marks along the new white paint. Small, uneven scratches near the bottom of the door frame. Almost invisible. He brushed them once with his thumb. The paint flaked slightly. Then he straightened, frowned, and said nothing. He closed the door gently, and the house fell quiet again. When I was a kid, our house sat right next to the elementary school, close enough that I could hear the metal swings squeak when the wind blew through the playground at night. It was the kind of school that always looked empty and harmless during weekends. Sunlight pouring over faded slides, the smell of warm rubber and dry grass in the air. I used to spend hours there, climbing the jungle gym or lying on the slide, just staring up at the clouds. That one day, I remember it was bright, still, and quiet. Probably a summer afternoon, though it could have been a weekend. The school was definitely closed. The parking lot was empty, the windows dark, and there wasn't a single car or sound from inside. I had a friend over that day, Mark, he's gone now, and we decided to hop the fence and play like we always did. We kicked gravel around, swung on the swings, and talked about nothing in particular, just the way kids do when time doesn't feel real. Everything felt so normal until the PA system crackled to life above us. It started faintly, just static and a few broken words cutting in and out, like someone who didn't know how to use the microphone properly. We both stopped swinging and looked at each other. The voice was there but not clear. Just bits and pieces of sentences clipped off halfway, disappearing as quickly as they came. I remember thinking maybe someone had accidentally left it on, or maybe the janitor was testing it. It was strange but not enough to scare us. After a while, the noise stopped and we shrugged it off, then went back to climbing the monkey bars and talking about cartoons or something equally silly. Maybe 20 minutes passed. The air had gotten hotter by then, heavy and still, and I remember the sound of distant lawnmowers echoing from the neighborhood. That's when the PA came on again. This time it was clear. A man's voice, low but shaky. "Hello?" he said, his voice echoing across the empty playground. We froze. The sound came from every speaker across the school, filling the air with a weird hollow echo. Then again, louder this time. "Hello?" The way he said it didn't sound like someone joking. It was uneven, like he was testing the silence for a response. Mark looked at me, his face pale, and for a moment we both just stared at the building. The windows were blank, reflecting the sky, and the doors were all shut tight. "Maybe it's the janitor," I whispered, but I didn't really believe it. The voice came back, quieter now, as if he wasn't alone. "I'm telling you they'll leave," he said, followed by muffled static like someone replying off mic. Then, "What are we going to do?" The sound was broken, uneven, the kind of voice that didn't belong on a school intercom. Mark muttered, "Who's he talking to?" I didn't answer. I just kept watching the empty hallways through the glass, waiting for movement. The air felt strange, thicker somehow, and the swings had gone completely still. Then the voice spoke again, sharper this time. "I know you're out there." Every part of my body went cold. His tone wasn't confused anymore. It was certain, almost angry. Mark whispered, "He's talking to us." But I knew he couldn't see us. The PA system was on the other side of the building, far from where we were. There was no way. Still, something in that voice made me want to hide. We ducked behind the slide, crouched low, our knees pressed into the gravel. The PA hissed again, feedback screaming through the speakers, followed by heavy breathing. It sounded close now, like the man was standing right in the office with his mouth too close to the mic. Then came the words I'll never forget. "If you're in here, you'd better get it out of here." He said it slowly, each word drawn out like he was warning someone or something inside. Not get out, but get it out. That one word changed everything. We didn't wait. We didn't think. We just ran. Gravel kicked up behind us, our shoes slapping against the pavement as the speakers crackled again. Another burst of static and half a word, then silence. We jumped the fence, tore across the yard, and didn't stop running until we were on my front porch, lungs burning, too scared even to look back. I remember the sound of the metal fence rattling behind us, but I don't know if it was the wind or something else. We never told anyone. Not our parents, not teachers, not anyone. What would we have said? That was a strange voice talking to no one over a school PA? That we heard a man arguing with someone we couldn't see? We were kids. No one would have believed us. After that day, I couldn't go near that playground again without feeling watched. Even years later, whenever I passed by that school, I'd glance at those old speakers and wonder who had been on the other end. I don't think he was talking to us. His words didn't sound directed outside. They were meant for someone inside the building. But who? The office was on the opposite end of the school with no windows facing the playground. Back then, there were no security cameras, no recordings. Just empty halls, locked doors, and that voice echoing through the walls. Sometimes I tell myself it was maintenance guys working on something, but why use the PA system? And why sound so frantic? Other times, I wonder if we caught something we weren't supposed to hear, a conversation between people who shouldn't have been there. Perhaps they were arguing, or perhaps something had gone wrong. The older I get, the more I realize how wrong that day felt even before the voice started. The stillness, the heat, the way every sound seemed too sharp. Mark used to joke about it years later, saying we probably interrupted some secret meeting or prank. But I always remembered the tone of that last sentence, the way it trembled like fear or guilt or both. You better get it out of here. I don't know what it was or who he was talking to. Maybe no one, maybe someone. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind carries distant echoes from the old playground, I still think about that man's voice, and the possibility that whoever he was talking to never actually left the building. When I was 6, I moved from China to the United States with my parents, leaving behind everything I'd known. The narrow streets, the sound of rain against tile roofs, and my grandparents' small apartment where the air always smelled faintly of tea and laundry soap. The new house felt too big, too quiet, and the language around me was strange, like static I couldn't tune out. I missed my grandparents so much that sometimes I'd wake up at night crying without knowing why. One afternoon, after struggling through another day of English words that didn't make sense, I took a nap. The house was still, sunlight spilling through the blinds in thin stripes, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I remember the warmth of the blanket, the way it felt like sinking into a slow, heavy calm. Then I dreamed. In the dream, I was back in China, sitting on my grandmother's lap, her thin arms wrapped around me as she rocked gently in her old wooden chair. The room was dim but soft, filled with the familiar smell of jasmine tea and the faint smoke of mosquito coils curling through the air. I remember the creak of the chair, steady and comforting, like the rhythm of her heartbeat. Outside the window, the world was quiet except for the sound of cicadas. She looked exactly as I remembered, her gray hair tied back, her eyes small but kind, her lips curved in that patient half-smile she always had when she hummed. She stroked my hair and said softly in Chinese, "This is just a dream, so let's enjoy it while it lasts." Her voice was calm, not sad, just matter-of-fact. I looked around and realized we were sitting across a narrow road. On the other side, I could see something faint, my own body, small and still, lying on a couch in a house that didn't belong in this dream. The air shimmered between the two sides, like heat rising from a hot asphalt road. I told her I didn't want to go back. I told her she could come with me instead, that we could cross the road together. She smiled again, stood up slowly and said, "Okay, I'll walk you across." Her hand was warm in mine, the skin soft but strong. We stepped onto the road, and the world grew strangely quiet, as if everything was holding its breath. The air felt thicker, the light dimmer. Halfway across, I looked up at her, and she looked down at me, and I noticed that her face had changed slightly. Her smile had softened into something that wasn't quite sorrow but wasn't peace either. When we almost reached the other side, she stopped. Her hand slipped from mine. "You'll wake up soon," she said, her voice fading like wind pulling away. I turned, reaching for her, but she was already standing back where we'd started, her figure small and still in the growing haze. Then everything vanished. I opened my eyes to sunlight flooding the room. My dad was sitting beside me, his voice low. "You were talking in your sleep?" he said. I blinked, still caught between dream and waking. He asked, "Do you know what dream means?" I barely knew any English back then, so I shook my head. He smiled a little, though his eyes looked unsettled. "You kept saying it," he told me. "You kept saying, 'This is a dream.'" He explained what the word meant in Chinese and said maybe I'd picked it up from a cartoon or a class, something small that stuck in my head. But I knew that wasn't it. The word had come from her. It had been her voice, her teaching me what it meant, in that in-between space where I wasn't fully alive or asleep. I didn't tell him that part. I didn't tell anyone. But the memory stayed, how real it all felt, the warmth of her lap, the smell of her clothes, the feel of the road beneath my feet. Years later, I asked my mother when the last time she spoke to my grandmother was before we left China. She thought for a moment, then said it had been the week before we moved. My grandmother had said she was fine, just tired, and that she'd see us again soon. But 2 weeks after we arrived in the US, a letter came. My grandmother had passed away in her sleep. My parents didn't tell me until I was older, perhaps thinking it would be easier for me to forget. But I remember waking up that day, the same day of the dream, to my father's voice, the sunlight, the strange word that somehow fit perfectly. I've had dreams since then, of course, but none that felt like that one. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I think about that road, how narrow it was, how quiet. I can still see her standing there, not crossing, just watching. The older I get, the more I realize maybe she never meant for me to bring her with me. Maybe she was walking me back. Not across some dream road, but across the line between whatever world she'd already stepped into and the one I was still learning to live in. It's been nearly 20 years since that day, but I still remember her voice, calm and certain, whispering through the fog of that dream, "This is just a dream. Enjoy it while it lasts." And sometimes I wonder if she was talking about that moment, or about life itself.